is called Gorilla Mind Games. This person worked the night shift as a zookeeper, and he always had to check on the gorillas in their indoor holding. So he had to walk up to each one of these gorillas' cages to make sure that everything was okay, to make sure they were sleeping. Usually he checked on them after midnight, and all he had with him was a flashlight. Now the thing is, he says that gorillas love scaring the heck out of people. So whenever he would go up to each one of their cages, he wouldn't see them, or they'd be hiding or pretending they were sleeping, and right when he got close to the cage, each gorilla would like jump up and scare him or pop out of somewhere. It says they loved hiding behind walls, they love sneaking up on you, they love bellowing as loud as they can right next to you. He literally said that haunted houses have nothing on gorilla jump scares. Honestly, I feel like gorillas freak me out in general just because they're so like huge and strong, and like the way they look at you, those eyes. So I don't think I would like to have this night shift. Anybody else? The next night shift story is called Standing for 8 Hours. This person worked overnight in a lab, and one night there was a guy at the bus stop right in front of their building. And this person said it was super weird because all the buses weren't running until the morning. So what was he waiting for there? He apparently had a backpack on, and he was waiting at this bus stop for 8 hours straight. Now, the strange thing was he was just standing there looking at their building, like looking through the windows at these people working, just staring, not moving. I feel like that would be such an eerie thing. It's not even like he's doing anything wrong per se, but I don't want to be stared at for 8 hours. I actually heard a similar story about a cafe that closed around midnight, and the staff saw this man walk up to the front of their store window, and he was holding this giant rock in his right hand. He apparently lifted it above his head and just stood there in the window for 30 minutes straight staring at them. So they had to call the police, they escorted this man away, but apparently it was super weird to see. I also heard other night shift stories of people actually throwing rocks at the windows and breaking them. That would not be fun. The next story is called Woman in a Nightgown. This is about a person who watches the security cameras at a transport company in Detroit. Now, he stayed up all night, obviously, watching the cameras, and this story takes place at 2 in the morning. He was watching the cameras and noticed this woman in a long white nightgown just appear in front of the cameras. She was barefoot, and he had no idea how she had gotten into the facility because it was completely gated and closed off. And she stood there for minutes and minutes, just standing there swaying back and forth. Now, there weren't too many staff members working there because it was a night shift. There was only about 3 or 4 of them, but he made sure he told everyone to watch out for this woman because he had no idea if she was unstable or dangerous or what was happening. She was actually standing at the gates to the exit of the facility, so truck drivers had to like come in and out, and she was blocking them. Well, one driver decided that he did not care and he wanted to leave and hit the road. When he was exiting the gate, the woman walked in front of the truck, blocking him. So they immediately phoned the police. This truck driver was like blaring his horn at this woman trying to get out, and she apparently ran to the passenger side of his car and tried to get into his truck, like violently pulling at the handle trying to get at him. So he sped away, leaving her there, and she continued to stand there in one place, not really moving for maybe 10 minutes. She eventually walked away. They never saw her again, and by the time the police got there was nothing they could do. How eerie would that be? Something about someone standing there in a white gown reminds me of like a ghost. That's what I would think of first. But apparently this was a real woman who was there. I don't know which one is scarier, a ghost or a real person. Alright, next we have a story called the Chuck E. Cheese Intruder. There's a story about a couple staff members that were closing the Chuck E. Cheese restaurant for the night. It had been a really busy day of birthday parties. The place had been packed all day, so they were very happy to go home. One of the employees went around turning off the lights, and when they got to the area with the animatronics and shut the lights off, they suddenly heard this snickering sound coming from somewhere in the restaurant. And it was especially creepy because this staff member was now standing in complete darkness, not knowing where this laughing was coming from. Now, they had instant chills go down their spine when they realized the snickering was coming from the area where the animatronics were. That's when he saw something move from the side side of his eye, and when he turned to look, he saw a person's shadow standing behind Helen Henny, which is the animatronic with the beak. You know which one. He called out and asked who was there, but he kept getting laughter in response. So he called the other employees over and told one of them to immediately call the police. And when they turned all the lights back on in the restaurant, they saw a man, probably in his mid-40s, crouched behind all the animatronics, refusing to leave the restaurant. When the police finally came to escort this man out, they told the staff this wasn't the first time this man had been trying to hide in a restaurant after closing time. They had no idea what his motive was or why he was doing it. Maybe he was unstable, but this staff member quit shortly after because he did not want that happening again. I could not even imagine how scary that would be. Alright, this next story is actually about the movie Insidious, which I find very interesting. So this is about a theater staff member who was working after hours. He was shutting down the projectors and closing down the movie theater. It was around 2 a.m. He turned off this projector in one of the movie theaters, and he suddenly started to hear the movie Insidious playing in a different theater. Now, what he found the most strange about this was there were no other staff members working at this time, just him, and the movie started right from the beginning, and it didn't have the 20 minutes of previews. Now, it says it was extremely out of place considering the projectors are programmed for the movies to start automatically with a 20-minute preview built in. A movie can't just like start from the beginning of the movie, it has to have those previews. So it's strange how Insidious just started. There were no movies scheduled on his computer, so he had no idea how it just started, but it's eerie because it's a horror movie and it's a really creepy horror movie. So he said he just locked himself in his office for the rest of the night. I don't blame him. And the last story we have is called The Fake Delivery Man. This person was a janitor at a local gym, and he was mopping the floors and had his back to the door listening to his iPod. When he turned back around, he saw this strange man in the window dressed in this sketchy UPS costume that looked like it came from like the dollar store. He had his face pressed to the glass, smiling and tapping on the window with one finger. And he was yelling at this janitor to let him in because apparently he had a package to deliver. But it was 1 in the morning, so obviously this was fake. His uniform looked incredibly fake. So the janitor called the cops, and when the cops arrived, they actually found the man down the street breaking into someone's house, and they had stopped him just on time. So apparently this guy always dressed in these creepy fake UPS outfits to try and get into people's homes. So always be careful when someone comes to your door. Make sure you have someone with you and make sure you know they're legit before you open your door, okay? When I was a kid, this was like my place to be. This was my playground. I love Toys R Us. But I am so creeped out by this story. It's like baffling to me. So yeah, I just had to tell you guys as well. This is about an employee named Jamie that worked at a Toys R Us back in 2005. And one day they got a strange box of dolls delivered. Now obviously it was normal for them to get huge toy deliveries all week long because they are a huge company. The store was incredibly popular back in the day. But usually staff was prepared for what toys were arriving. When they opened the box, there were about 50 of these baby dolls with long brown hair. But what was really strange was that they were oddly tall. Like their legs were so unproportionate from the rest of their body. Like when Jamie looked at them, he saw aliens. Like he thought that these dolls looked like aliens. It was like humanoid creatures that resembled baby dolls. The other very unsettling thing was that the packaging of these dolls said, "Take me home and I'll be your secret friend, but don't tell anyone because they won't understand." What does that even mean? As weird as Jamie thought these dolls were, he spent the next couple hours putting them up on the shelves. Now, a week went by and nobody was buying the dolls. They were the only toys in the store that weren't selling, which was bizarre because usually when Toys R Us restocked something or put up a new toy, people were all over that, but not for these dolls. Some customers would go up to staff and would ask things like,
"What are those dolls? I have never seen them in any commercial before."
So finally, after about 28 days of these dolls just sitting untouched on the shelves, a little girl went over and begged her mother to buy one. As she was in the checkout line buying the doll, the mother told Jamie, "Listen, this doll really gives me the creeps, but her birthday's coming up and I guess I'll get her what she wants." So the girl skipped out of the store happily with her new doll. But a week later, her mother came back in asking to return the doll, and when Jamie asked her why, she said that her daughter claimed that the doll was telling her mean things. And Jamie was shocked because that doll wasn't built with any speaker or talking mechanism. It was just a simple doll with no batteries. But the mother said the doll was saying things like,
"I don't want you to have any friends but me.
And
Nobody likes you, so you should be alone."
Jamie was appalled and said that they would never sell a doll like that in their store. And the mother nodded and said that her daughter probably just had a very creative imagination. That night after the store closed, Jamie had to stay an extra 3 hours to clean up and stock some of the new items. Just after 10 p.m., he heard the sound of sobbing coming from somewhere in the store. Now, most of the lights were off, so it was hard to see. The aisles were super dark, and to him it sounded like someone might have been accidentally locked inside the store after closing. Maybe it was a kid that got like separated from their parents. So he started to follow the sound, and after a couple minutes it changed. The sobbing turned into a small voice that said,
"Hello? Come and find me. Wanna be friends? Don't tell anyone."
And immediately he thought of those strange new dolls. He walked up to them and looked as they stared at him from the shelves. How the heck are they talking? He thought to himself. He examined them further, looking for a button. He couldn't see anything obvious, so he searched and searched until finally he found one. It was hidden right beneath the doll's sleeve, and it was the tiniest button he'd ever seen. It was so small that parents would never be able to find it when purchasing the doll, but something that kids would discover while playing with the doll later on. Jamie pressed the button and was horrified to hear the doll say,
"I'm your only friend. You should only talk to me now. People think you're boring. People just really don't like you."
And it went on and on and on. He could not believe how many sentences these people had programmed into the doll. He decided that the next day at work he would notify management to get rid of the dolls. So in the morning he led his manager down the aisle towards these dolls. He explained to her what happened, and he showed her that tiny button underneath the doll's sleeve. And the manager said, "Oh, that's strange," because the doll wasn't advertised as having any batteries or any speaking mechanism. And Jamie told her that it was because the parents weren't supposed to know about it. Only the kids were supposed to find out later, which is so creepy. That's like the creepiest part of this whole thing. So the manager pushed the button, and the only thing that came out of this doll was sweet and kind words like,
"You're so pretty. I am so glad to have you. I love you so much."
Now, Jamie ended up quitting that afternoon because he was so confused and disturbed. Management would not remove the dolls because they found nothing wrong with them. But Jamie knew that something was very wrong, and he knew that the next night shift worker would find out soon enough. And that is how the story ends. Now, honestly, I feel like this is a creepypasta. I know it's advertised as a true story from a real night shift worker, and who knows, maybe it is. Maybe like some creepy and weird company created these creepy dolls to scare kids. I have no idea. I mean, there are some evil people in this world, but to me, it does sound like a fictional creepypasta. Let me know what you think down below. I mean, if it's not, maybe also comment down below if you've ever had this doll. I hope you have it because that's horrible. Alright, so the first creepy story in Walmart is called The Lady in the Bee Costume, which sounds so weird, but wait till you hear it. So it's about this guy who was a brand new employee at Walmart. He was 18 years old, he was just starting out, and he was super excited. Now, this new employee actually had the night shift. And as a cashier on the night shift, their job was mostly to stay awake and zone their area. Everything was fine until about 1:30 a.m. every single night. He would get the bumblebee as a visitor. And what he means by the bumblebee is this woman in a bee costume would literally enter Walmart at 1:30 in the morning. He described her as this old woman who wore this bee-looking Halloween costume that was falling apart. It looked really ragged. And there was never anything strange about her actual behavior. She was very quiet. She would walk through the store doing her groceries. She never purchased anything weird, and he never asked her why she was in a bee costume. But there was definitely something very eerie about seeing her walk into the store when everything was empty. I also think there's something eerie about someone being in a costume when it's not Halloween. All I know is that if I worked at Walmart and someone came in at 1:30 in the morning dressed in a huge head-to-toe costume, I would be pretty freaked out. The next story is called The Magic 8 Ball, And you guys know I did a whole video on magic 8 balls back in the fall, so if you want to see all the creepy stuff about that, definitely go check out that video. But this story is about a little kid that was walking around Walmart with their mother. Now, she was pushing around the cart and they went through the toy section, and this little kid tried to sneak a magic 8 ball into his mother's cart without her noticing. Well, the mother didn't notice until they got to the cash register. And as she was unloading things off of her cart, she saw this magic 8 ball and absolutely freaked out. She told her son this toy was so evil that he shouldn't even be looking at it or touching it, let alone bringing it home. And the kid started crying because they wanted this magic 8 ball so bad. And then the kid said something so creepy that the cashier will never forget. He pleaded with his mother and said, "But I want to talk to the tall dark man in our house." And the mother was like, "Nope, we're putting this away." So that was definitely a very creepy argument for this cashier to encounter. I low-key agree with the mother though, we should not be having those evil things around. The next Walmart story is called The Whistle Man. This happened the night before Christmas Eve. Walmart was closing a little bit earlier than usual because of holiday hours. There was this worker who was in charge of locking up, and he decided to do one last walk around of Walmart just to make sure everybody was out of the store. It seemed totally empty until he started approaching the toy section. He started to hear this eerie whistling, but at first he thought that maybe one of the toys had gone off because it sensed him there. But as he walked closer, he noticed this man dressed in all black at the end of the aisle, looking down at the ground as he walked. And the strangest thing about this man is that he was whistling. So this Walmart worker politely told the man that he had to leave because the store was closing, but the man just ignored him and kept whistling as he walked through the aisles. So this employee obviously felt very unsettled because he was confused as to why this man wasn't listening and why he was whistling. And what was weirder is that he just couldn't see the man's face because he was looking down the whole time. So after about 5 minutes of trying to get this man to leave, he went to get the help of 2 other employees. So he left to get them, and when he came back, the man was gone. And when they looked at the security tapes, there was no evidence of him even being there. Now, there was this rumor that this Walmart was built over a very old cemetery and maybe it was haunted. So it definitely spooked all the employees, and yeah, that's pretty creepy. The next Walmart story is called There's Something Under the Car. A night shift employee was walking back to her car after her shift. It was a foggy night and the parking lot was almost completely empty. There was only, I think, 2 other cars there aside from hers, and they were all very spread apart. She felt anxious and wanted to get to her car as fast as possible. So she was fiddling in her purse to try and find the keys, and she picked up her pace, and that's when she noticed a strange humanoid creature that was on all 4s crawling out from underneath her car. Now, it was so dark that this creature only looked like a shadow. So she stopped in her steps, obviously not knowing what the heck it was. And the thing moved so slowly, almost like it was circling her car, waiting for her to get back. So she decided to unlock her car with her keys, hoping that the lights and the sound would scare it away. And she was right, because as soon as her car beeped, the creature ran away into the darkness. So she jumped into her car, drove home, and that had never happened to her since, and she still has no idea what it was. When she tells people this story, no one believes her. They say it might have been a raccoon or some sort of night animal, but she says no, it was something more than that. And the last creepy thing I want to talk about that happened at Walmart was about this creepy doll that someone found in a cart. Now, they actually got a picture of this doll. They got a few pictures of this doll. It was just sitting in a Walmart cart, almost at the very back of where you put the cart, so it looked like it had been sitting there for days. So this person just assumed that someone was not coming back for it. So one of the pictures shows them throwing it away in the trash. So they were wondering, did someone leave it there for a reason because they did not want to have it anymore? Was it a haunted doll? Did someone leave it there by accident? It was just a super eerie sight for this person to see as they were putting away their cart. And they said they also got this really dark vibe around it. So yeah, this could have just been an innocent kid's toy, but it's also like, why would they leave it there for days at a time? Like, if they really cared about it, wouldn't they have gone back to claim it? The first first story is called The Candle Aisle. There's a night shift worker who claims there's something very off about the candle aisle. I, for one, love candles. There's like no other smell in the world that's that amazing. I actually collect them. I own way too many candles. Some people collect coins and stamps. I collect mugs and candles. Totally normal. Anyways though, this worker says that whenever the store closes and everyone leaves, it's almost like something is lingering in the candle aisle that all the employees have sensed. In fact, this worker says he always sees a shadow person standing at the end of the aisle while he's stocking the shelves. And apparently it only appears for a few seconds and then disappears, but it's almost as if it wants people to know that it's there. And I feel like the main question is, why the candle aisle? This shadow person could have chosen any aisle in the store, but it was like, you know what? Candles. Not that I blame it. If I was a ghost, I would probably choose there as well. But that's a new one. I've never heard of a ghost in a candle aisle, but that's why I make these videos, right? All right, the next story is kind of a sad one. It's called The Soda Machine. There used to be an employee that worked at the store and all the other employees just loved him. They actually called him a legend, and he worked at this Target for about 10 years and then he unfortunately passed away. Everyone was completely devastated, but not too long after his passing, very strange things started happening in the store. The most prominent was that the soda machine in the staff room started acting up. It would flash and turn on and off randomly, and the creepiest part was that it kept dispensing his favorite soda. And later in the night, staff kept reporting of seeing this shadow near the soda machine. And what's even eerier is that this shadow was the exact height and body shape of this employee that passed away. Other employees have felt someone poke their shoulder while they're working, and when they turn around, no one's there. Now, the employee that died was known to be a jokester, so maybe he was just fooling around with the staff in his afterlife. But everyone who works there says that it's not bad energy. They never feel like it's negative or evil. Some people even say it's sort of a comforting feeling to know that he's still around. So I feel like it's both a really sad story, but also very eerie at the same time. All right, the next story is called The 1800s Ghost. Employees have said that between the hours of 5 and 6 a.m., there's a woman in a long blue dress that walks through the electronic aisle. It looks like she's from the 1800s, so they were wondering if maybe the Target was unknowingly built over an old graveyard. And after she passes through the electronics aisle, she usually makes her way over to the toy section. She likes to mess around with the dolls on the shelves, and she presses all the buttons so the whole store can hear them going off. She also likes to pull the doll's arms in strange directions. So basically, she just likes to make a fuss and likes to cause mischief so people will notice her. But it is really interesting that she's in this long blue vintage dress. All right, the next story is called Whispering in the Fitting Rooms. There was this employee who was about to check all the fitting rooms in Target before the store closed. She just wanted to make sure that everyone was out, that nothing was left behind, and everything was put away. But as soon as she walked into the fitting room, she got hit with this really strange vibe. You know when you can just sense that someone is close by, or you can just sense that someone is watching you? I feel like it's this intuition that we all just have naturally. So that's what she felt instantly walking into these fitting rooms. It felt like she wasn't alone. So she called out, "Hello? We're closing soon," and there was no answer. So she started walking down the aisle and opening all the change room doors to see if anyone was still in there. Just as she was approaching the very last change room stall, she heard a sound. It was like muffled whispering coming from behind the door. She couldn't make out what it was saying, so she pressed her ear against the change room door. And as soon as she did that, the whispering stopped. So she said, "Hello?" This time even knocking on the door, but there was still no sound. She tried to open the door, but it was locked. So she knelt down to peer underneath the stall to see if she could see anyone there. And when she did that, she was shocked to see these wet, dirty feet on the floor. This person had no shoes on, and water was just like dripping all over the tiles. So obviously she freaked out. She ran to get another employee, but when they got back to the change room, the person wasn't there. The door was open, and all that was left was a puddle on the ground. I can't even imagine how terrifying that would be. That reminds me of like that creepy girl who crawls out of the well. What's her name? Samara? The girl from The Ring, like she's all like wet and stuff. Ugh. All right, and the last story is called Ice in the Baby Aisle. That reminds me of the song, Ice, Ice, Baby. All right, so to our surprise, this story actually didn't happen after dark, and it didn't happen to an employee, it actually happened to a customer at the store. She was walking through the baby section holding a tumbler of iced tea in her hand, and the lid on top was tightly fastened. You guys know what those are, right? I feel like everyone has them nowadays. The straw just comes through the lid and the ice is underneath, so it's pretty much spill-proof. Well, she was walking down this aisle and felt this tug on her hair, and before she could even react, the top of her cup just popped off, and the ice and her drink just flew out and spilled all over the floor. She ran to tell the employees what happened, but no one believed her. They said she must have tripped and fell or did it on purpose as a prank, but she said no. Something made her cup explode on its own. So later that night, a night shift employee was looking through the store footage from the day, and they actually were able to see what happened to her. She was telling the truth, and this employee just watched as her cup actually just exploded right in front of her. And from that day forward, all the employees were really afraid of the baby aisle. So I'm wondering if maybe it was like this little kid ghost that was trying to mess with her, because you hear a lot of stories of little kid ghosts like pulling on people's hair and stuff, so that's very creepy. Alright, let's get into the video. Today we're going to be talking about some very creepy, true drive-through stories. These are from employees that experienced something just so creepy that they had to tell the world about it. Most of these happened on night shifts because nighttime was when everything goes down. So let's get started. The first story is called The Man with the Skeleton. It was about an employee that worked at a McDonald's drive-through last year, and they had a regular customer that was a little bit odd. He described the customer as having a very long beard, and he was always wearing a Hawaiian shirt for some reason. But what was even more strange and alarming was that in his passenger seat there was a skeleton. Now obviously it was a fake skeleton, but every time he went through the drive-thru, this skeleton would be sitting beside him. He would dress the skeleton up differently every single time, and he would never mention it or say anything about it when he went to grab his coffee. It was almost as if he thought it was like a totally normal thing to do, but it freaked out everybody at the McDonald's drive-thru. But still, each day he'd come with his skeleton. The next story is called The Dolls in the Back Seat. There was a lady who worked at the Dairy Queen drive-thru, and this one time later in the evening, after the sun had gone down, a woman ordered 5 ice cream cones, which obviously isn't that unusual, but when the lady drove up to the window to get her ice creams, the employee saw that sitting in her back seat of her car were 5 creepy dolls all buckled up nicely. And as she was handed these 5 ice cream cones, she would one by one reach back into her back seat and give them to each doll. An employee said she seemed totally normal, just like the man who had the skeleton. She was acting as if nothing was wrong, didn't say anything about it, just drove off with the 5 dolls in her back seat who all had their ice cream. I mean, I've heard about people who actually collect haunted dolls that have spirits in them, and they take them with them everywhere. They act as if they're real kids. So I don't know, maybe they were like ghost dolls. It's kind of creepy to think about. The next story is called The Thermometer Lady. There was this lady who ordered her coffee to be 140 degrees exactly when she was at the drive-thru. Could you imagine being that employee who hears this?
Yeah, I need my coffee to be 140 degrees exactly.
Well, she picks up her coffee, goes back into her car, and 5 minutes later she storms back in and says,
This is 139 degrees. I said I want 140.
She literally had a thermometer in her car to test how hot her coffee was. Are you serious? And because it was 1 degree off, she freaked out, caused a whole scene, so everyone there called her the creepy thermometer lady. I cannot believe there are people that are just this difficult in the world. Alright, the next story is called The Man Without a Face. There's a story about a night shift worker at McDonald's who worked from 12 a.m. to 5 a.m. And during that time, as you can probably imagine, he saw a lot of strange people. The odd ones come out at night. Me. But there was this one night in particular particular that literally made him want to quit his job. He had his headset on waiting to hear people's orders. It was a particularly quiet night, and just after 3 a.m., a car slowly pulled up. He heard this muffled whispering in his headset, so he had no idea what the person was saying. So he said, "Sir, I can't hear you. Can you speak louder?" So the whispering got louder, but it was almost like he was speaking an unknown language. It sounded like backwards English or like just some strange gibberish. So the employee thought that maybe the microphone was broken and asked this person to come up to the window. Well, the car pulled up, and sitting in the darkness of the driver's seat, all shadowed by the car, was a man with no face. And he didn't speak, he didn't move. He just sat in his car silently, almost as if he was waiting for something. So the employee immediately shut the window, called the police, was completely freaking out. And as you can imagine, the police thought he lost his mind. They figured it was a prank or something, so the police never actually showed up. And the next morning, this employee quit their job and said they would never work a night shift ever again. I don't really blame him. If I saw someone with no face at 3 a.m., I'd be gone. All right, the next story is called The Mannequin Man. This is another night shift story about a guy that worked at Taco Bell. And a couple times a week around 11 p.m. when the drive-thru was a little more quiet with less cars, this man dressed in a completely black cloak outfit would walk up to the drive-thru speaker and just stare at the camera. He would literally stand there for 10 minutes straight, not moving, not blinking, not doing anything, just staring at the camera. He wouldn't answer anyone that was talking to him through the drive-thru. So the employees that worked there started calling him the Mannequin Man, because that's exactly what he looked like to them. It was like he was frozen in time, just standing there. And then after being there for a while, he would just like walk away like nothing happened. And then he would come back 4 days later. So they would always see him a few times a week. So they didn't know if it was like on purpose to maybe scare the workers. Was it a prank? Other people say that this particular Taco Bell was built over a very old cemetery, so this could just be an angry ghost. Just, you know, paying them a visit, just staring at them. Either way, it's pretty darn creepy. And the last story is called The Unhappy Meal. There was a woman who came to the McDonald's drive-thru and asked for an unhappy meal. And obviously those don't exist, so the worker was like, we can't do that, but we can give you a happy meal. But she wasn't satisfied with that answer. She said she was having a very bad day and needed something that reflected her mood. So she said an unhappy meal would be perfect. If this isn't me. So once again, the worker said, those don't exist. So when she drove up to the window, they just gave her a normal Happy Meal. And they watched as she pulled a pen out of her purse and literally drew a sad face over the Happy Meal's happy face. She literally replaced the smile with a frown. Mood. And then she said, "There, much better," and she drove away. I don't know why I included this story in this video. I just thought it was like a whole mood. But in all seriousness, have you guys seen the newly designed Happy Meal boxes? I don't know if this is real or not. I think it is because I'm seeing pictures everywhere. This is a terrifying design. I think it's scaring kids more than it's making them actually happy. There's no way someone actually thought this would be effective, right? Right? And can we just have a moment of silence for Blockbusters? So before there was Netflix or Crave or Amazon Prime, there was Blockbuster. It was the place that you would go to rent the newest movie. There were no apps where you could sit at home and play a movie on demand. You had to actually get off your butt and physically walk into a store to rent one off the shelf. It was basically like a library for movies, if that makes sense. And then you had to go and return your movie within a certain amount of days. Now my parents would take my sister and I to Blockbuster like every single Friday night, and we would just like walk through the aisles and pick out any movie that we wanted, and then we were both allowed to pick a snack before we checked out. Like guys, I was even going to Blockbuster back when they had VHS tapes on the shelves for us to pick from. Do any of you guys even know what those are anymore? It's so crazy to think back to my childhood because there were literally Blockbusters everywhere, like multiple per town. You would be driving along the road and constantly see them everywhere. Because like I said, it was one of the only places where you could actually go and rent a new movie. Now in 2010, the rental company company filed for bankruptcy after Netflix's popularity continued to grow, and it was honestly the saddest day for me when I saw all the closing soon signs on the Blockbuster stores that I had gone to all my life. And it's crazy making this video because I feel like a lot of you watching probably have never been to a Blockbuster or even really know what Blockbuster is. Like specifically, obviously, if you're like one of my younger viewers, if you're my age or older, you know Blockbuster. We know. And it's so sad that you guys won't be able to have that experience. Things are just so easily accessible now, and I feel like it takes the fun out of it, you know? You no longer get to have a fun outing with your friends and family to like go and pick a movie. Like that experience was what I loved more than watching the movie itself, if that makes sense. Okay, so before I get into some really creepy legends and creepypastas, let's talk about my creepy experience, which I have briefly mentioned on this channel probably years and years ago. So back in the Blockbuster days, you would walk through the aisles looking at all the DVD covers, and when you found one you liked, you wouldn't actually take the real DVD cover home. You'd reach behind it and take a case with the Blockbuster logo on the front, but the real disc would be inside of it. Does that make sense? Well, because of this, many people would accidentally take home the wrong movies because they would often get mixed up, and this actually happened to me when I was little. Now, I'm gonna guess this was back in like 2003, maybe 2002. My dad took my sister and I to pick out a movie, and we both agreed on watching Sailor Moon. Well, when we got home and went to play the movie, it ended up being this really creepy werewolf Goosebumps movie, or at least I think it was Goosebumps. It was something like that, but it was a creepy horror werewolf film. Now, I was probably around 8 years old at the time. My sister would have been like around 5. So obviously the horror genre was not something that we loved yet. But my dad, who didn't realize how scared we would get, decided to play the movie anyways. I mean, he literally rented it for us, so he might as well play it, get his money's worth, you know? So we did, and my goodness, I still remember the fear I had while watching this, and especially afterwards, I had nightmares for years. I could not get the image of this creepy man transforming into a werewolf out of my head. And like back then, they did like all practical effects and stuff, which is somehow scarier because it's like this dude in a creepy like long-toothed werewolf costume. No. And yeah, it was like this movie where this creepy beast was like stalking people in their homes and in their barns out in the backyard, and it was weird. So like that's like a scary memory that I have from Blockbuster, which probably isn't scary to everyone, but it was for me. Okay, so let's talk about the story about the haunted Blockbuster. I found this story from an old Blockbuster employee that claimed to have worked at a very haunted Blockbuster back in the late 90s. She said that the activity would only really happen after closing time, and it was something that all the employees in the store kept secret from the public. They would only talk about their experiences among themselves, but they would never make it known to the customers, obviously. Apparently, employees would see this see-through figure of a woman lingering at the very back of the store, just staring at one of the shelves, almost as if she was standing there trying to pick out a movie. Now, coincidentally, she would always be near the horror movies whenever they saw her. And when people would walk up to her to find out what she was or who she was and why she was lingering there after closing time, she would quickly grab onto a DVD and disappear inside of it. Because this happened for years and years, she became known as the Blockbuster apparition and was sent to travel from movie to movie, and you never knew if you would be the one renting the one she currently resided in. They said that if you took her home, her reflection would appear in your TV screen as you were watching the movie that you picked out. But some people also said that the VHS or DVD would start vibrating and emitting a strange sound after midnight. The really creepy thing is the employees of this Blockbuster said that it was possible for her to be residing in more than one movie at once, because there was this one evening where 3 of the employees took home movie rentals to watch on like a Friday night, and all 3 of them said that they saw her reflection in their TV screens that night. So the question that people have is this just the only store where this ghost is hanging out, or is she in every single Blockbuster and like makes her way around to all of the movies? That is the question. And then lastly, we have a story called The Scratched DVD. There is another strange story about a family that rented a movie from Blockbuster, and when they took it home and removed it from the case, they saw that it was scratched, which is like the most frustrating thing ever to happen. Well, they still decided to try and play the DVD as they didn't want to drive all the way back to the store late at night, and things seemed pretty normal in the first like 20 minutes or so. But soon after, the DVD began skipping, which, you know, is obviously what happens when you have scratches on the surface of it. But the creepiest thing was, it was scratching on this scene where there was a close-up of the main character talking, and it seemed to skip over every 4th or 5th word, and they immediately got goosebumps at the sentences these words were forming. It was saying, I am here in this room, I am here in this room, over and over again. Like it would say those words as it was skipping and then like replay that exact sentence. So you can imagine those poor kids in the room with their parents screaming and crying at how creepy and strange this was. And I really wish it said which movie they were watching because I really want to know. But yeah, those are the creepy stories I was able to find about Blockbuster. Obviously these are like creepypastas, legends. I don't know how true they are, but I did go onto eBay and I bought a super old Blockbuster VHS tape, probably from like the mid-90s. So when that comes in the mail, maybe we'll see what happens after midnight. Ice cream's origins are known to reach back as far as the 2nd century BC, but no one's able to find an exact date of origin or who the creator really was. But we do know that Alexander the Great enjoyed snow and ice flavored with honey and nectar, so that could have been the start of it. Snow cones. Now, the first ever advertisement for ice cream appeared in 1777, and until the 1800s, ice cream remained a rare and exotic dessert enjoyed by mostly the elite. So basically, you could only have ice cream if you were rich and well known. The wide availability of ice cream happened in the 1900s, and now about 1.4 billion gallons of ice cream is eaten each year. Am I making you hungry right now? Comment down below what your favorite flavor of ice cream is. If I had to choose, it would be between chocolate peanut butter and vanilla bean. Alright, I wanted to talk a little bit about ice cream trucks. Now, I feel like everybody has like a love-hate relationship with them because we have to agree the music is so creepy, but the ice cream is great. In 1920, a man named Harry Burt invested in 12 refrigerator trucks for distribution around the city. He made sure they were pristine white and put professional-looking drivers in signature white uniforms. So basically, 1920 was around the first time they had like actual portable ice cream. Then this man wanted to come up with a scheme to lure kids towards the truck, which sounds very creepy, but he wanted to figure out how to properly sell this ice cream. So he got a bell, which he took from his bobsled and made it chime so everyone on the street would know to come for ice cream. Then, as you guys know, it went from a bell to an actual tune that we all recognize and know, and they came up with that tune to lure children. Now, let's start getting into the creepier stuff. This first fact is super eerie and concerning. There was such a thing called ice cream poisoning. Milk was not pasteurized in the US until the 1890s, which meant any dairy product was potentially laced with bacteria that caused horrible illnesses like scarlet fever, tuberculosis, and a bunch of other ones. Ice cream poisonings were a common event back then and were regularly reported in the news. They literally had what was called ice cream epidemics. So for example, if hundreds of people went to a fair and ate the ice cream there and they all got poisoning from it, that would be an ice cream epidemic. So it would happen at fairs, picnics, parties, big events, and so many people died after eating ice cream. But thankfully, years later, they figured out how to get out this harmful bacteria and ice cream is safe to consume today. All right, let's talk about a very creepy TV episode that came out a few years ago. Okay, so there was this one particular episode from a show called The Haunting Hour that really freaked kids out about ice cream trucks. It's about a boy named Marty that always borrows money from his family, and he soon becomes obsessed with catching a mysterious ice cream truck that only he seems to be able to hear and see. One day he's told about this boy named Jimmy Jeffrey, who also used to be obsessed with this ice cream truck, and one day he got onto it and never came off and he was never seen again. Days later, Marty sells a bike that his father had given him to finally earn some of his own money to use to give to the ice cream truck. That night he manages to stop the ice cream truck with his father's tire spikes, and after getting in, Marty encounters Jimmy Jeffrey, who is now a 30-year-old man, frozen in the back. And Jimmy tells Marty that he's been waiting 30 years for someone to take his place, and explains that the ice cream truck runs on the souls of those obsessed with catching the creamy cold ice cream truck. So Jimmy ends up escaping this truck, leaving Marty in the back, yelling for help as it drives away. And before the truck drives off, Jimmy says one more thing.
The truck is all yours until someone else catches you. Until then, it's all you can eat.
And that's how the episode ended, and apparently this one was super creepy. I've personally never seen it before, but comment down below if you have. All right, next we have some very creepy ice cream commercials that you actually might recognize. There's this brand called Little Baby's Ice Cream Shop, and they're known for their very creepy and shocking ice cream commercials. One of its most famous commercials is a video depicting a person covered in marshmallow fluff, scooping the substance out of their skull with a spoon and eating it. Now, this commercial has been viewed over 7 million times on YouTube. Another ad shows a woman with mouths for eyes, and the brand says they actually pride themselves in having these very creepy commercials, and I guess it's good advertising because people will always remember them, so good on them. And lastly, we have a creepypasta about midnight ice cream trucks. Now, I was actually shocked at how many midnight ice cream truck stories I was able to find online. I'm assuming most of them are creepypastas, but I do know that we all agree that the music it plays is so eerie. I think the latest I've ever seen an ice cream truck in my neighborhood was probably 10 p.m., which is definitely really late, and it really freaked out my parents. They told us to make sure we stayed inside because there's no reason for an ice cream truck to be out like after the sun goes down. There was this one story about a brother and sister who were woken up in the middle of the night by the familiar tune of the ice cream truck, except the song sounded a little bit different, kind of like when a toy starts to get low on batteries and the sound almost distorts a little bit. So something sounded very off about this ice cream truck, but they were still very intrigued. They ran to the window closest to the street and they saw the truck, and it was painted in such a dark color that it almost blended in with the night, and it was moving very, very slowly. As it crept up to their house, they decided to sneak out to get a treat without their parents knowing. So they grabbed a couple dollars out of their father's coat pocket and ran to the end of their driveway. The ice cream truck stopped in front of them, and they squinted their eyes to try to see who was sitting in the driver's seat, but it was so dark. All they could see was this hand outstretched towards them. Confused, they gave the man the money, and the hand disappeared back into the darkness of the truck. He was gone for what felt like 5 minutes, and then they were handed 2 ice cream cones covered in fudge and sprinkles. They skipped off happily back into the house and ate up their ice cream as quick as can be. Except when they got to the very middle of the cone, they tasted something very strange. They looked down into their cone and saw what looked like raw meat stuffed into the bottom of it. That's when they realized what a horrible decision it was to go out to a random truck in the middle of the night. What were they eating? And that's how it ends, and that's why you don't just go up to strangers, people. I like literally felt so disgusted reading that story, like I could taste it.